Ladies and gentlemen, we have a return guest. So excited to have him back on. David Daniel Gonzalez of the Mystic Skeptic Radio Show podcast. And tonight, there is demand for it. Very much, I was leading that demand because it was an interesting topic. He wrote a book, Demonology of Ancient Israel, The Truth About Demons, Possession and Exorcism, Raiders of the Unknown. I mean, so many buzzwords there that are getting me going. I'm fascinated by your central thesis. Tell us, give me what's a little background about this book, David? And thank you for coming on again.
You're welcome. The reason I wrote the book is because I was working as a chaplain at a hospital. And, you know, the chaplain program is very secular in the sense you're learning counseling, you're learning how to deal with your own emotions during trauma, during crisis, how to not impose your own views on the patients. But it was funny, somebody brought up, you meet all kinds of different people, but somebody brought up that one patient was seeing creatures in their room and that they were very frightened. And they saw something like a dragon. And the first thing that people, it's weird because you have a spectrum of different ministers. So you have people who are very traditional and then people who are very liberal or orthodox on their views. And the people who are more traditional, they're like, oh my goodness, there might be a demon in there. And then the people who are more liberal, they're like, whatever. They're just hallucinating. The medicine made them sick. But then I started thinking, I was like, if we don't tackle the problem of demonology, how can we be sure? Both Judaism and Christianity believed originally that all illness came from the demonic realm. So, I had another fellow chaplain tell me, we are doctors of the soul. Some people go to a normal doctor for their physical, they come to us for the spiritual. And it's like, well, if you're a doctor of the soul, you need to know your stuff.
Yeah.
So if someone comes and tells you, I think I'm demon possessed, call a priest. But first of all, you need to ask them, are you even Catholic? Because they've called priests on people that weren't even Catholic. And then second, the priest is not going to come if you're not a member, and they only have one exorcist in the whole diocese. So you also have to know about Catholic demonology. But most of all, what is it about demons that people at that time, they thought that leprosy, blindness, epilepsy, everything came from demons. So as modern men, we could say, it's just a bunch of baloney. People are ignorant. They had no understanding of the scientific world, and they just said everything's a demon. Well, actually, it's more complicated than that. So if you want me to start from the beginning, we start from where did even the idea of a demon come from?
Yeah. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Okay. So if you look at different cultures, we were talking about Buddhism in the last show. There's these beautiful paintings that are like Chinese paintings where they show people being good, they're in heaven, or they're in like a heavenly realm. People being bad, they're in this fiery place where there's monsters and they're eating them, stuff like that. Same in medieval culture, same in a bunch of different cultures, you see that. So why is it that humans always portray negative things with the demonic or these monsters or these beings that live under the earth? Well, psychologically speaking, you would say, well, anything that's bad is worldly and anything that is good is spiritual or heavenly. Well, that is, that's something you see even in Greek mythology. People who were bad, they would throw them in Hades, and then they would have to carry a boulder, or a bird would poke their eyes out. So a lot of medieval paintings that you see, they're more about Greek mythology and they're really about biblical understanding of demons or hell. But back in the times of the Babylonians, and we were talking about Abraham, they had these different little demons that were at fault for different things. So the force of evil are always associated with the bad things. Even in Pandora's, it wasn't a box, it was more of like a base. When she opened it, all the bad things came out. And in the depiction, they showed like these dark figures. So But before you talk about demons, you have to talk about angels.
Hmm.
So back to the skeptic and all of us would say, well, first, is there a God? Second, does he have servants? Third, does he have bad servants that go against what he wants? Because you have to believe those three things before you go into the demonic stuff. And I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Conjuring.
Oh yeah, that is when people ask me what is my favorite horror movie, that is usually the first one I say.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of problems with The Conjuring because not only do you have to believe in witches, you have to believe that witches come back and they get inside women only, just like in Evil Dead. They don't mess with
Right.
men, they just get inside women. And then they have all these powers that you have to believe that somehow Satan or the occult give them. So before someone's able to be possessed by a witch, you have to believe that humans can transfer their soul to someone else, like the book, a Dybbuk. And
Mm.
then and that's something is the Jewish demon for those that don't know, but it's not even a demon, it's actually a person. And then there's all these things. So it becomes laughable because for you to take the story seriously, you have to acknowledge that all those things are real.
Of
So
course,
let's
yeah.
so this is a skeptic in me. I'm gonna prove that demons don't exist.
Okay, great.
So to be able to overcome the fear of demons, first you have to understand what demons are supposed to do. And it's not that I'm trying to disprove the spiritual realm from a Judeo-Christian perspective, but I'm trying to disprove the idea that demons have powers that they were never given. Is if you ever watch the original Exorcist, they say, well, maybe it's all suggestion.
Hmm.
If you bring a priest that believes there's a demon to a girl who believes there's demon possessed, maybe by doing the right rite or ritual, that somehow she's gonna let go of that false assumption. So when we're talking about the creation of the Torah through Moses' writings or Abraham's account, or whatever, there was this idea that God was the source of intellect or spiritual realization for the Hebrews, and then God had a pantheon of servants. They call it the divine council. So if you watch the movie Clash of Titans, they show Zeus, and then you have Hera and Poseidon and all the guys like or whatever they're called by the Greeks, and then there's a name from the Romans. You have everybody chilling in heaven, and they're looking down on earth. Well, the Canaanites had the same idea. They had El was the main god, and then he had a son named Baal, and then Baal had cohorts, and they all have different people. So a lot of people, if you read Anita Diamond's The Red Tent, they say that the Israelites stole those ideas from the original people that lived in the land of Canaan.
Hmm.
And that's where they developed many names of God. So you have El Shaddai, Adonai, Elohim. All those names have a correlation from the deities of that place. Well, what's different from Hebrew monotheism than from Canaanite polytheism is that their gods had no problem with having multiple gods. They were all friends. It's like the super friends. The
Yeah.
God of the Israelites was very demanding and very self-limiting. So in Jewish tradition, they say that Adonai is the nurturing side of God, and actually El Shaddai is the nurturing side of God, and then Adonai is like the Lord, and then Elohim is his creative power. So each name has an attribute, but it's still the same being. You don't have multiple beings and multiple attributes. And then he's also holy or separate from his creation. So when he breathes onto the earth, or the spirit of God dwells on the earth, then makes life sprout. It's a different creation story than the Babylonian or Canaanite one, whereas usually there's destruction, the waters is filled with monsters, and then the monsters come out, and then the children and stuff. So the story is more concrete, and it's more progressive in a positive way. So that'd be the difference between that and the Canaanites and Babylonians. Well, from there, you get this idea that the God of Israel is a jealous God, that no other deity can be allowed within the realm of his servants.
Mm-hmm.
That being the case, anything that is not God is idolatry or is foreign. So if it's foreign, it's bad. So what happens when the Israelites are going through and they're developing their kingdom? Any other deity becomes a source of strife, a source of evil in opposition to their deity. So when you see the gods of the Canaanites, Molech, Dagon, Baal, Astarte, they start taking the attributes of demonic forces. And
Hmm.
the greatest example is when the Pharisees go up to Jesus and say, "How can you believe this man? He is he exorcises demons by the power of Beelzebub." Baal Zebub is the god of that area, and they would set up an altar, and people will defecate in it, and that would be the way they worship their god. So Baal Zebub is the Lord of the Flies.
Oh my
So,
gosh. But
so
is that a real thing, or was that just entirely
the real thing.
so people defecated? What? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Just
Yeah.
paint this picture for me. They defecated in worship of this god.
Yes, but and you know, maybe not because it's kind of like when you read from the church fathers about heretics. They say, well, I know that guy was a Jew because he doesn't believe in Jesus. And it's like, well, maybe he wasn't a Jew, but he didn't believe in Jesus. But like, so they make an accusation. So I would have to look up the source, but what is known from scholars is that that was the way they worshiped. Maybe the Israelites were accounting that those filthy people, they poop over there, they must be Canaanites, whatever.
Right, right. That's an interesting
So, but
theory.
that's so what's funny is that there's a version of the Gospels of the New Testament where
Mm-hmm.
they translate the stories of Jesus into modern language, and the author had the audacity to, instead of saying uh, he um, he does exorcisms by the power of Beelzebub, he said he does exorcisms because he's a poopy face.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And what he was trying to do is he was trying to, like, the historical um, like connotation of what they were saying. That's how offensive it was. To call you Beelzebub or to be associated with Beelzebub, that means that you dwelled in sewage and that your worship was worthless.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I thought that was just an interesting
So,
historical
so
moment.
then suddenly demons were associated with latrines. And
Oh.
a professor of mine and I were in the bathroom, and there was other people there, and somebody said hi to the professor, and he was very quiet. And then we came out of the bathroom. I said, "Why wouldn't you say hi to the guy?" And he said, "Because in Jewish tradition, demons hang out in toilets. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to participate in whatever they're doing."
That's so interesting. That's it. We weren't taught that at Hebrew school. I don't know if that's something that's worth thinking about, or like how old school that is, if modern rabbinical thought has changed that. But I mean, is there any sort of concern we should have about toilets as a modern day Jewish person?
But let me tell you how I got scolded by the same professor. So we were talking about this, about health and healing in Jewish tradition, and he was saying, the rabbis thought that demons were connected to illness. In the Talmud, it says that if you leave a cup of water outside overnight, and if you drink it, you can go blind because a demon has entered it or done something to it. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of superstitious ideas like that throughout the whole, even in the New Testament, and this whole part of the spectrum of Jewish experience. So I told the rabbi, "Come on, man, you really, like, it says that. How can we, as a modern man, take that seriously?" And he's like, "Well, you think you're so sophisticated and you think you're so knowledgeable. Tell me, how would you call something in meat or water that makes you sick? How would you describe that?" So, well, it's bad, is harmful. And he's like, "What is a demon? A demon is something bad and harmful." So the language used by the ancients was a demon for a microbe, for a bacteria, for a virus, in lieu of not having the terminology that we have now.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we're going back to Beelzebub, defecation, the creation of the demon. I really I want to stay with you because I think it's important for you to disprove demons to me. So
So at
take it
least
back.
in Judeo-Christian tradition, demons originally were a description of wickedness, idolatry, sexual impurity from the foreign countries surrounding the Israelites, in their land.
Got it. Got it.
So anything that was foreign was considered demonic. Question
Interesting.
is, do they have those powers that are attributed to them? So
Mm,
it says in different passages in Isaiah and Jeremiah that those who pray to demons, um, they have nothing. Like they either pray to demons and that's they're doing bad for doing that, or that idols are nothing because they have no eyes. They have eyes that cannot see, ears that cannot hear, mouths that cannot speak. So there's this iconoclastic battle between the living God, the God that is active and is the source of creation, and these false idols that have nothing to give, but the people give them attributes and they pray to them and they so there's an anti-superstition, anti-idolatry narrative that is created, but then it goes into the spiritual realm where it says in Isaiah that people were praying to the she goats, and there's different terms for the demons, and some of them have to do with these almost like um, mythological characters that people believed in. So it was almost like a Pan kind of thing where the ram becomes the uh, I think in even the modern satanic movement in America, they have Behemoth, that is
mm,
like the ram with, and then he
yeah.
has two children from. So all that comes from biblical ideas or from Near Eastern thought. So in the movie The Exorcist, they have this demon that is from Babylon, and it's a winged lion that he's the one that enters the girl.
I
So
thought that was one of the most interesting parts of that movie. At least the beginning of The Exorcist is so. I feel like it's not discussed enough. It in a way it makes it feel more real for me, even though it's complete. It's a William
it
Peter
was
Blatty.
very well researched. Like that's, but Pazuzu is almost like a gargoyle from the Babylonians. So
Interesting,
it was built on really good information.
huh? Cool, cool. Okay, so we've got these where are we in the story now? We've got these sort of these ancient the sort of disdain of the foreign and the impure actions and all these kind of things. And people are ascribing these traits to demonic qualities, which interestingly enough kind of makes me think of racism and immigrants and like the whole issue with telling people saying that we can't have Mexicans come over, like putting these negative qualities on a group of people, just blanket slapping negative qualities on people for no reason. But I wonder how did that really, like, did people start seeing examples of what they'd consider demonic powers amongst these untouchable types back then? Like, was that something they started creating? How did that really
Well,
come up?
before we help anti-Semitic tropes, let's take a step back. So what people say in their holy book and what really happened sometimes have to kind of be worked through. So
Mm,
there's been DNA studies from ancient Israelites, and what they found out is that they have the same DNA as the people from Canaan.
hmm,
So they're questioning the story of the Exodus, that people were living there, Abraham and his descendants, and then they went to Egypt for 480 years, and then they came back. They're questioning that story, that actually they never left, or they only a few people left and they came back. So they're saying that Israelite religion was actually homegrown, and that
hmm.
it and that so it wasn't an invasion as people think.
Right,
Because
right.
that's where you start dealing with the ethnocentrism and the colonialism and stuff like that. So now there's that's why history is important, archaeology is important, because you can assume from the text that that's what happened, and there's two versions of what happened. There's one where they actually become friends with some of the Canaanites and they actually cut deals, and there's another version where they slaughter everybody. So
Interesting.
I had a professor of theological studies who was saying, he's a historian, he was saying that one version is like the legendary version, what people wish had happened, and another version is the more realistic version. So
Mm,
this idea of untouchables, I don't really see that in the Hebrew scriptures. Maybe there's a little bit related to idolatry, like people who start worshiping foreign gods are dismissed or shunned, but there's never a racial component. There might be something where people from other areas are seen as suspect, but the thing is they were in the midst of it and they were slaves and minorities themselves. So whenever people start getting like that, you gotta always be reminded of passages in the Torah that says you should be kind to the strangers because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So
right,
we always
right,
got to think about what were they teaching, what were the leaders teaching, and what was the original narrative, and what were the people doing. So we
right.
cannot defend someone who was prejudicial back then, but we can defend what the original text said. And the original text said that everybody was created in the image of God, that everybody had the ability to connect to God. And you see even times where their worst enemy, like there's a general who was a Canaanite or he was from a different group and he was doing bad things and he gets sick and he goes to Elijah and Elijah helps him get healed. So you see mercy and universalism here and there. It's not the main thing, but it is something. And it says that there was a multitude of non-Israelites who came to Sinai and became part of the Jewish people. So there was no, we don't allow these types. And also another one that's very interesting, you brought it up. When Moses married the Cushite woman, um, his sister said, "How dare you?" And then she was plagued with leprosy or
Hmm.
sar. So God actually punished her for being prejudicial. And all she says is the country where she comes from. She doesn't say it's because she looks like this or because she looks like, I don't like her because she's from a different town and God would not allow that. So then we go into illness becoming an act of God. So where did it jump from God causing the illness to demons causing the illness?
Yeah.
So there's a shift where, as we were saying in the previous conversation, in Christianity, the devil is the one who causes bad things. The devil is the one who has been given reign over destructive things. In a lot of passages in the Tanakh, you see God is the agent of illness, of destruction, sometimes through his angels and sometimes directly through him.
Interesting. Okay. So is that I'm trying to think here. Is that where you is that your proof? Was that it right there? I'm wondering if I just missed it too quickly. Is that
Well, the proof is that the demons can only be whatever you attribute to them. So in Israelite religion, demons are kind of uh, almost like the fifth layer of the the realm of God. So you have God as the source of everything. God is as the one who judges people. And when Moses was afraid of going to speak to Pharaoh, it says, "I am the God of your ancestors, and I am the one who brings about uh, health and sickness, and I created the lame and the blind." And so, so God is described as someone attributing himself with the ability to make people whole or limited in their abilities or all that. And then there's a point where he gives Sa'ar to Moses, and they say Sa'ar is actually not leprosy, but it's a spiritual illness. They can get on the walls and stuff like that. It's a little superstition, a little hard to process, but there's the idea that God is the source of all that. Well, then you got the angels that he sends in favor, like they go before Moses and like the pillar of fire, or he sends the angel of death, or he sends angels to bring about plagues on the people. And then you have the demons, who are the opposite of an angel in Christianity. In Judaism, the demons are the outside forces. So the gods of Egypt, the gods of the Babylonians. So this almost ethnocentric deity that is the one that takes care of them has a purview that is only to the Israelites. The other deities are for the other people, but they automatically become demonic because they keep you away from the original source. So then, like I was mentioning, if God was the source of illness, then the Israelites couldn't fathom that God would bring about negative things to the people that serve him. So then they attributed that to the outside forces. So then that's why you see in the Talmud and the Gospels that it was the demons who are causing someone to be paralytic or an epileptic. And then Jesus or the other rabbis have to extract that, and the person is made whole. But we might see that a lot of these stories are actually metaphorical, that the person was dwelling in idolatry and God took them out through the agent of Jesus or some other rabbi.
Wow. So what would you then say? Let's talk conjuring then, because I'm very curious about this. As a mystic skeptic that you are, conjuring really deals with the work of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and or at least a Hollywood version of the work of what these predominant ghost hunters, demonologists. um they they had a place in Connecticut, museum, all their stuff was there. They claim in the movie, at least, that they have hundreds of hours of audio and video footage of these possessions and hauntings and poltergeists and stuff like that. What do you make of that? What was their career?
Well, first of all, you have to. This is why I think we talked about it in the other show about how easily people are fooled.
Mm,
If you know demonology, like we were talking at the beginning of the show, humans cannot possess other humans within Christian or original Judeo-Christian perspective. A human cannot, like, as a kid, I watched the movie Stigmata. It was one
mm,
of my favorite movies. And even at that time, when I knew very little, I was like, so the lady had a demon, or the lady found the scrolls of Jesus, and then she died, and she touched the rosary, and then the girl comes and grabs the rosary, and then now the lady's inside of her, and now she's acting weird, and then she gets a stigmata and starts flying. It's like, how can a human jump to another human at the moment of death through a rosary? And then it starts showing signs of a godly Christian. The stigmatic only comes to people who are holy within Catholicism. So
hmm.
the girl was wild and didn't believe in God, and somehow Jesus signs appeared to her. That makes no sense. It's completely ridiculous. Just like the
Right.
movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. The Exorcism of Emily Rose, she gets possessed, so people believe in the Virgin Mary. Why? At the end of the movie, they say, this happened so the Virgin Mary would be adored by her followers. It's like, so God tortured this girl for months, and she almost died, and then so people can follow Virgin Mary. And does the Virgin Mary even appear to people to begin with? Why did this Jewish girl from 2,000 years ago have anything to do with anything? So if you believe that these guys went around exercising people, they were Catholic, and they had given a special commission by the Vatican for him to be able to perform exorcisms, then he would have followed the rite of exorcism. And the rite of exorcism, and I have a copy of it, is that you're fighting Satan and his minions. You're not fighting the witches of Salem. How
Mm,
did we go from the witches of Salem to Satan? So now you're assuming that women who were ecstatic or dancing or influenced by African religion, that they were all Satan worshippers. And somehow Satan gave them the ability to come back in some lady back in the 60s. Come on, man.
What do you make of the videos? I mean, did they actually have videos? Did they actually have? I know there was audio. Audio, I feel like, is trickier. I mean, was it all just suggestion, self-suggestion,
Well,
and
it goes back to the premise of The Exorcist. If they truly believe it, they're able to make an impact on that. I saw the Conjuring 2 where the house was moving and there was all this poltergeist
yeah,
stuff. Like, it just goes back to, if that's all you can think of, if you have no other options, then it is going to be demonic. If you walk out into the woods in the middle of the night and you think the devil is after you, the devil will manifest because of your. It's like a subconscious thing. Like, that's the thing that you're going to see. You're not going to see a little rodent. I went camping with my wife 4 years ago, and I had seen every single horror movie ever made. And every time that a squirrel, possum, or something moved, I thought I was going to get murdered by Jason or somebody. That's how
right.
paranoid I was from watching all those horrible movies.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly can influence thought. I suppose it's just amazing to me that these two people, and this is certainly, I don't know if you know this about me, David, but I'm a certified hypnotist, and I've definitely studied a lot of trances and the way people can put themselves into reality tunnels, if you will, or different ways of going through life. As you're talking about, if you think there's a demon, it's going to be there. It's fascinating that these people, if demons aren't real, if there isn't any of this, still manage to, I mean, it's about as real as Disney. If that's sort of the perspective, they're like creating a dream world. All those items aren't possessed. Annabelle, all those little things. I mean, they took a something from each of their various investigations. Um, and yet, well, I guess it really is the power of, it could just be the power of suggestion. Do you think that is a good way to sum it up, or is it something else?
Well, let's go back to my original premise. There is no demons, but there is demons.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I want some explanation on that.
so the
Maybe
reason I
before we
have
get there.
to do that caveat is that for any of our atheist friends who are listening to us, the only way you can make a case for anything is if you disprove it first and then you build up a case for it. You can't assume anything. You can't assume that there's a realm full of little creatures who are trying to get you,
Mm,
because then we're living in fantasy land. So in the scriptures, there's a passage where it talks about Hasatan, or Satan, having an argument with God over Job being a good guy or a bad guy. That's why Jews, as much as they would want to dismiss um, ancient ideas or even Christian ideas, they have to acknowledge that there is a Hasatan, but they have to
mm,
describe him differently than the Christians because they don't want to kind of fall into those mentalities. But we know that before Jesus, there was a group of Jews who believed in a demonic realm, and it was very apparent because they believed that Enoch, one of the people in the book of Genesis, went to the different realms and he saw um, demonic realm. He saw, and even in the Talmud, it says that there is a Gehinnom, um, that is almost like a hell-like place, and it has some similarities to Hades, where there's angels that have these whips of thunder and things like that. So we got to think about, like, these concepts are there, but are they there for a didactical purpose to instill fear in people who are misbehaving? Are
mm.
they there because they are describing something they saw in human terms that they can understand? Or are they there in their purest form as they truly were? That's really the debate. So as someone
Yeah.
who has spiritual perspective, I can say that I've been living my life like there is no demons, so I don't live in fear. But I have seen horrible things done by people, horrible things happen in the natural world, that it makes me wonder if there is a negative force that is trying to destroy the work of God or the positive things that happen in the universe. So when you have people like these two individuals in The Conjuring, what are they gaining out of it? Are they doing the work of God by helping people be released from these forces? or are they charlatans who are trying to become famous? From what I read, they were charlatans.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. I didn't yeah, I need to sort of read more of the skeptical literature on their charlatanism. Do you have any good resources for that off the top of your head?
Well, there's a story, and I've been wanting to interview the skeptic on it. There's a movie, Demon House, that came up on Amazon Prime, and it's a family in the South somewhere where their kid was flying in the air, like he was walking backwards in the ceiling, and they heard voices and stuff like that. So this guy who is a self-proclaimed demonologist, or one of those guys, ghost hunter, he buys the house and then he destroyed it, and then he has all these recordings and stuff like that. But very conveniently, he destroyed it, so then people can never verify what he did. And then the guy who investigated this found how a lot of those things were dubious. So a quick Google search of these individuals, you'll find people who question what happened, and I think that's healthy. If we believed everything that we heard, then there would be a problem because we would be back in medieval times. And my biggest pet peeve with Latin America, where I'm from, is that people fall for every single charlatan that ever existed. Right when the coronavirus became apparent, there was some guy who's claimed that he has knowledge from the aliens, that this is the first wave of plagues, and then they're going to send another one to wipe us out.
Right.
Everybody was so excited, and this kid, and this and that. And it's like, where is this coming from? Like, it's easy to believe stuff that is silly. It's hard to look at life as very cruel and very difficult, and then take a step back and say, well, what positive things, what non-destructive things are happening, and then maybe find hope in that.
Interesting. So we're talking about your book, available. Is it only available in Kindle edition, or do you have a hard copy?
Yeah, it's very short. It's a paper that I wrote for my program, a master's degree, and it's very short. Is that, and then I made it into an ebook. I wish I was a better writer. I wish I could ramble on. Somebody gave me
right.
Graham Hancock's book about the Antarctica and Atlantis, and it was like so thick I couldn't get through it. Some people can just go on and on and on. I'm like straight to the point. It's like there's no reason to get confused and go everywhere. And a rational perspective does not diminish a mystical perspective. You can have both, and that's the thing with Judaism, is that you can have polarities and still not lose your mind.
Interesting. Oh man, I was about to ask you what you thought about Graham Hancock, but now you make me want to talk about Judaism. Briefly, Graham Hancock, anything there you think? Do you buy any of the alternative history, archaeology stuff?
And there was true evidence. It's like I did a show about aliens and how to disprove the alien conspiracy, and the same thing. It's conjecture. You grab a little bit. Some guy made a map in the 1500s, and then another guy made a map in the 1800s, and then you put them together, and then you show some other things and a satellite thing, and then you create Atlantis in Antarctica. It's like, come on, man.
Göbekli Tepe? Anything there? Anything? I know the Joe Rogan episode. He's talking about Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, I don't know either. It's some sort of proof that, or not even proof. It's always this thing contradicts our understanding of when civilization actually arose. It happened earlier than we thought.
I would love for that to be true. I love sci-fi. I love alternate histories. If all his ideas that we had spaceships or whatever before the pyramids, and the pyramid is just the tip of some giant thing, and you go in there like Aliens versus Predator, and that would be amazing. That would be awesome. But like, show me the proof, and it's a waste of time. Like, unless you're able to develop something from like real sources. Like they found some amazing stuff underwater that is like true from ancient history and stuff. I love that kind of stuff. I think that people need to know more about our history. But when you start creating an alternate history that is based on very flimsy information, it doesn't do anything for humanity. And it's kind of like the ancient aliens. If humans now are incapable of doing anything, then it really shows, like, I think the message behind Graham Hancock and other people is that we can achieve greatness, but then we went back to this dark ages, and somehow we need to get there again or reconnect with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool, but don't give me this dog and pony show to get me there. Like, give me opportunities. Like, we also talked about the ancient aliens thing with the going to Mars, and I have some issues with going to Mars, but then there's pros also. So if we can achieve the most amazing things as human beings, I'm all for it. But we got to think about the repercussions of it. And I wish that the time that we're spending fantasizing and speculating about the past, we would spend it developing things to help us live better in this world. Then that's also one of the messages of my program, is that we need to get back to what can we do to support each other here and not keep destroying what we already have.
What is your relationship? Do you connect demonology at all to Sodom and Gomorrah? I'm very interested in Sodom and Gomorrah, what that was, what was the culture, how did that form there, if it was real, there was validity to it. Can you shed some light on that little village?
Well, and it is, in Judaism, they kind of write it off like they were inhospitable. That's why they were destroyed. And in Christianity, we know the other version. But the one thing that people need to think about, and this is why my book is important, is because I dig out a book called the Testament of Solomon. And the Testament of Solomon is like the key between Judaism and Christianity. It's a book that has both Christian elements and Jewish elements when it was still in a nascent state. Because some people say, well, Judaism didn't start until the rabbis wrote the Talmud. Other people say, no, Judaism was already there, and there was different types of Judaisms. The Jesus Judaism and other kinds, Pharisees, Sadducees, blah, blah, blah. So the Testament of Solomon connects a lot of demons to sexual depravity in their perspective. So again, we have to be very sensitive, very careful that there's a lot of stuff that is cool now that back then it wasn't. And it's not that we're passing judgment, it's just that was the culture. So with that culture in mind, they considered the demons were dwelling in the worship of other deities. And there was cultic practices where you would go into the temple and be involved with a prostitute. And the prostitute was a nun that only served the man during worship. That was in some of the Canaanite religions, and I think in the Greeks and the Romans as well. So whatever was happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, there was some type of sexual component that whoever wrote the story had a problem with. The issue is, how do you address a problem? And that's why we also have to think in historical terms. I've talked to one of my mentors about how in the History Channel they'll show the Romans go in and they pillage a town and kill everybody. Well, that's just what the Romans do. The Vikings go in, pillage and kill everybody. Well, that's what the Vikings do. And then when the Israelites did it, how dare they? They're the servants of God. How would God? And then the problem is they start talking about God like it's their friend. Well, if you think that the Israelites are bad, is it the Israelites that are bad, or is it the God that told them to do that is bad? And we can talk about that, about the different versions. And in Judaism, there's actually not, there's a literal version of what happened where God was the one that told them. And then there's the didactical version where it says that, but we know that it didn't happen because the children will never be blamed for the sin of the fathers. So God forbid that he would kill the children with the adults. So Sodom and Gomorrah is a didactical version of what maybe happened, and then did it happen through fire from the sky? Maybe it happened in some other way, but the idea is that God was unhappy with their behavior and their corruption, and then there was the demise of that place. Maybe the place fell apart by itself. The Mayans' culture was destroyed and it imploded, and then the people dissipated and lived in other areas. Maybe that was a very ancient town that, because of corruption, because of non-godly behavior, fell apart, and then they created a myth that the people were there and the angels came and then it was destroyed. And that's where people get the idea that it was aliens that lasers or something, like almost like Star Trek ship came and destroyed
Yeah.
them to save Lot and his daughters. But it's a very difficult story, and to brush it off like, oh, they were just inhospitable or whatever, that's what happened back then. It has many layers, and I would hate for people to assume that because of what's depicted, then the whole story and everything is crap because they're being judgmental or hateful of a particular group. What it is the way that the ancient man would describe something that they found problematic.
Hmm. Wow. So do you think, I mean, what do you, was it just that town that was bad, or did God supposedly signal out those people? What do you think like created the culture of what was going on in there?
Well, and then the hero of the story is Abraham, who was trying to save the people, and he's arguing with God. In what religion do you have someone who actually stands in between and puts themselves at harm's way to save the people? But then he says righteous, so then you have to describe what righteous means. So you see the description of righteousness, and then you see what was unrighteous about that town and the way that it's depicted. So they say that it is somewhere in the Dead Sea, and the whole place is a pillar of fire or of salt, and that's why it looks like that. Maybe they were trying to justify why is the Dead Sea so dead, and they're
Hmm.
like, well, maybe God destroyed it, and that's why there's nothing grows there, and it's limited in the scope. But again, not being there and not having had that experience, um, and that's the hardest part, is that people can use that to justify hatred or some type of attack on people that they consider to be inappropriate, and that's the biggest challenge of religion, is that whatever has used from religion to do bad things, it has happened. So it takes people who are more sophisticated not to do away with ideas from religion, but to understand them within the context of what was going on at that time, without jumping into conclusions and creating a whole system just based on one story.
Hmm. Yeah, I honestly think if people really want to dig into more of your stuff, I mean, the demonology of ancient Israel, the truth about demons, possession, and exorcism, Raiders of the Unknown is 4.99 on Amazon Kindle. Then you have Heirs of the Kingdom, Jewish Christianity's relationship to Second Temple Judaism. Another Raiders of the Unknown, but they're all the Raiders series, which is also 4.99. And then the one that I'm interested in, which you mentioned briefly, I'm curious if you can possibly, even in under 10 minutes, give a summary, is the Gabriel revelation, mysteries and revelations. Is that what you were mentioning before, where you were talking about the connection between Judaism and Christianity that you were able to pull out?
Well, the connection that I was talking about was in Demonology of Ancient Israel, where I talk about the wisdom of Solomon. Because Solomon
Oh,
had power
okay.
over the demons, and there's a story in Josephus' writings where they used a ring that supposedly was passed down from Solomon to exorcise a demon that a servant of Caesar had. So most people think of Josephus as one of the first historians, and now you have a story of how would you exorcise a demon in the history of the Jews.
Hmm.
So it's amazing that it correlates with some of the stories that Jesus exorcisms that Jesus did, but it uses a root to be able to take the demon out. So there you see connections with Babylonian rites of um, getting rid of demons. But the Gabriel tablet is a fascinating story, and it's kind of gotten muddled through the news cycle because they've been trying to disprove it. So what it is with the Gabriel tablet is that someone found a piece of rock that had written in ink an apocalypse related to the Gabriel angel Gabriel, or the archangel Gabriel. And it's fascinating because the Dead Sea Scrolls were written in ink on paper,
Hmm.
and then you find stuff that it was carved onto rock, but this was painted onto rock. We don't even know how it survived, but it has been dated to around the time before Jesus, and it is a key between the connection of ancient Judaism and the Jesus movement, because as Israel Knoll, the person that I feature on the book, talks about, it leads into the teachings of Jesus, or what is believed had happened to him based on his views of prophecy. So, like we started the conversation with, well, to believe in demons, you have to believe in angels first. The Book of Enoch that I mentioned earlier, it's where people get the idea that the angels lost their way, that they went against God, and then they came to earth and they mated with women, and then they had children who were giants, as the Nephilim. All that stuff is connected somehow, because if all those things are true, then the demons that Jesus was fighting inside people are part of that realm. The Gabriel tablet talks about Gabriel speaking to the Messiah, son of Ephraim, who is Ephraim is usually connected to Joseph, because those are the children of Joseph, and there's this conversation of him coming and him bringing about God's kingdom or something like that. The most divisive section is where Israel Knoll thought that it was about him being killed and being raised in 3 days. Most scholars say that that's not what it says. So people have been trying to find, where did Jesus get the idea that the Messiah would die and that he would come back in 3 days. People make the allusion to Jonah, that he was inside of the whale for 3 days, or the big fish, but that there's no other source in the Torah or in the Tanakh that talks about that. Well, here is what they call an apocryphal text, or intertestamental, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that mentions something about 3 days. So it makes it very important, because there was already a tradition or understanding that something would happen in 3 days. In Daniel, it says that is like in the half of 70 weeks, it's like 30 and a half, or 7 weeks, so 3.5. The prince is done away with, and then he comes back. So there's a lot of, again, it's almost like conjecture. There's like little things that you can kind of see, but they're not very concrete. And that's where the debate between Judaism and Christianity comes, is that they think that the Christian community, who were originally Jews, they took a lot of very, I wouldn't say superficial, but very nebulous ideas, or undefined ideas, and they developed them to fit their perspective, versus ideas that were just common. But every group did that. If you study the sectarian groups like the Essenes, even the Talmudic rabbis, they all took different perspectives and they incorporate them. So the Gabriel tablet is a very interesting thing, that it's like, now you have scholars finding sources to support that the Jesus movement had a strong tie to Judaism, but it was a very sectarian, very specific perspective. But in what you see in Christianity, and like early Christianity, is a very well developed demonology and angelology. So that's where the key is. Like, before we start talking about demons and all that, why is it that people believe in demons so much? Is because in the New Testament, demons are playing a role in this war between Jesus and whoever he's, and then he starts making accusations that people who do not support him are involved with the demonic realm, but they make accusations of him too. So they say that the Essenes, they did the same, that anybody who wasn't an Essene was part of the kingdom of Beliar. Beliar is the Satan of the Essenes. And for those who don't know, the Essenes were the ones that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you have Jewish groups who are condemning anybody that doesn't support their perspective as demonic, and then Jesus does the same. So that's where a lot of anti-Semitism comes from, where people misunderstand that he's attacking fellow Jews for not following his path, but other Jews were doing the same, and they're imposing these demonic components. But if you study demonology and you realize that demonology is idolatry, then it's this battle among Jews: who is more righteous, who follows God more faithfully. If you don't, you must be an idolater.
Great. You know what? One final question, and it's related to something earlier that you said, and sort of the teaser you left me with the first time you were on. You were talking about if you really want to understand the paranormal, if you really want to understand the supernatural, you have to go back to demonology. Do you have any instance where a modern paranormal show or a show that would talk about exorcism uh and events that an investigator would look into, what do you think was the earliest manifestation of demonology turning into that paranormal sort of view, like beyond idolatry, where it becomes like, oh, this thing moved and Satan or Beelzebub caused this thing to move? Can you track that historically, where people started having instances in the waking world where they were like, oh, this is some higher being that caused this?
Well, if you look at ancient man, they thought everything was supernatural. So lightning, storms, rain, everything was attributed to a deity. So then, with time, if the triumphant religion, such as the Israelites in Canaan or the Christians in Rome, becomes the all in all, then instead of saying that there's a God of water, a God of thunder, a God of anything else, now you have the God of all, but anything negative is not from God, so it's demonic. So when you look at the ancient Christian mystics, they would go live in a cave and they would feel hunger and they would feel lust and they would feel any type of desire. They would say those are demons, and they would paint a holy man trying to ward off demons. They're trying to get into the cave. So Greek philosophy that was incorporated into Christianity brought this hatred of the mundane, and there was some influence of that from Paul. Paul said that the moral man cannot achieve divinity or connection with God, but you have to connect with the spiritual. So there was already this Hellenistic idea that everything human was filth and everything spiritual was wonderful. So suddenly everything became demonic because it wasn't under the control of God. So when you were a monk and you had no sexual desire, no desire for riches, so going back to Buddhism, now being like a Buddhist is bad, or actually is good, and everything that is related to the self is evil. So I would hate to fall in the same trap and say that people who seek self-fulfillment and self-love are going in that route, but it can become destructive. And ancient man was willing to fill it up with demonic and these crude perspectives. They would paint the demons with multiple eyes, and every creature they saw that was dangerous, like a viper or a bat or whatever, became the demons, or they were demon forces. So the fear of nature brought about this fear of demons. And now I think it's sad that the modern man who knows that all those things are not there are going to be worried because they hear a squirrel on their roof, that that's a demon. So the paranoia that it creates is actually not helpful to reach those higher spiritual realms.
Wow, that makes a lot of that. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, look, again, you can definitely hear more of this fascinating insight from Mystic Skeptic Radio Show / podcast with David Daniel Gonzalez. We will put the links to the Demonology of Ancient Israel, the truth about demons, possession, and exorcism, as well as the rest of the books in the Raiders of the Unknown series in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for coming on. It's such an interesting, another great episode. For me, I learned so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good pleasure.
Thank you.